So this is the SplendidSnakes app that you will create from the how-to step-by-step documentation that I created for the iEducate 2019 conference, and also anyone else who'd like to use it to learn just sort of basic things within Thunkable, but a bit more than the usual tutorials. So this one is actually focusing mainly on how to use databases, how to create functions, to call functions, a little bit of if-else condition statements, that type of thing. Oh, and also variables. So let's get right into it. So first of all, the way this works is that there are only 4 screens, and we can see them all if I were to do this, which is I'm basically scrolling from the left side into the middle, and so I'm scrolling to the right. And so you'll notice that we're on the home page, but I can change this to the facts page by doing that, and quiz, feedback, etc. So you'll notice that on all the other pages I don't have a home button, and that's because the navigation panel does that for us. So first of all, this main page, or the home page, has what I would call probably like a logo, and all I did is I asked my daughter, she's 11 years old, and I asked her, could you create or draw a nice picture of a snake? And she's like, sure. And she got excited. She drew this picture. I cut it out in Photoshop and used it in here. So the nice thing about that is when you're doing, if you're using any of this kind of developing an app, a website, whatever, in class, is that it gives you an opportunity to also talk to students about copyright issues, and they can't just go take a photo or take a picture off the internet and use that. Well, they can, but there's ethical issues around that. So particularly kids who like to draw, but sometimes who just like to be a bit creative, and maybe they use paint or whatever. Just in terms of art, if they like that, this is one way that you can get your students hooked. So my daughter really enjoyed that, cut it out, put it in, and there it is. So then if I click on the facts page, very simple layout. It's actually only got 2 rows. The top row is probably 15-20% vertical height of the screen. That's what I set it at. And so then the rest is obviously 80%. You don't have to actually define that, because it's smart enough to figure out, hey, if one row is 20% and there's 1 row left, it's going to be 80%. So the top row has a label. That's our title. And then the second row has a web viewer, which is great. You just throw in any kind of URL that you find, put that in, and it's an animal facts page. This is through Science Kids. So that way they don't have to write all their information, because it's obvious that this is coming from another website. So that's pretty handy. So then I go back and I'll go home, and let's go to quiz. So that's what we actually we'll be focusing on. But before we do that, let's have a look at the feedback. Okay, so this screen has 3 rows. Top row is just is a label with a bunch of text in it, and then the second row has a text input. I had to change the properties a little bit to make it so that it looks bigger. So that is actually how to do that is also in the documentation that I created. And then in the third row, there's a button. So basically, I can send myself an email. And the reason it's myself is because in the code, I've put my email in there, and you would put your email or a business email or whatever. So I've used my, I don't know what I'm writing. I'm just like tapping. So that doesn't make sense. That's okay. So I'm going to show you what happens. If I click on send feedback via email, it will go directly to my default email application, and notice that it's grabbed the text box details here, and also the subject line. I didn't write that in. That was actually part of what I had put in the code, so I haven't done anything currently while I'm using the app. That's kind of nice for example, if you have a business or you want people to give you feedback, then you can actually quickly identify which ones are from the app. And then of course it's coming from my email. I could change that, etc. So we're going to cancel out of there, delete draft. Okay, so back into here. I'm going to go back home, and let's do the quiz. So the quiz, very simple. We could do so much more to this quiz, but I've kept it simple just to get the idea out of how to use a database, and also how to reuse a screen, because I have seen students, invariably it's every time I teach any kind of app development, I've seen students basically create, let's say they want 6 questions in a quiz, they'll then go ahead and create 6 different pages or screens. And that becomes complicated, lots of work and unnecessary. And then they lose the whole idea of actually reusability. Eventually, if you were to create an app like that, let's say it had 50 questions in the quiz and you'd have 50 screens plus all the other screens that would come with the app, you can imagine that's probably going to make it laggy as well. So what I've done here is I've shown an efficient, easy way of how to create a simple quiz, 3 questions, which are 3 records in the table, the database table, and then it's then populating the label at the top here where it says, what do snakes eat? That's something coming from the database table. Also the values in the buttons, that's coming from rows, from columns in the table. And and then eventually we're going to choose, let's just do this. So what do snakes eat? We're going to say meat, which is correct. So the score comes up, which is 1 because I got that right. And it also says correct, which is part of an if-else functionality, or condition statement that's within the code of the actual screen. So notice that we're now onto the second row of our table, and nothing has changed in terms of the layout because we are reusing the same screen. Okay, but this time it's using the second question. So snakes smell with eyes, nose, or tongue, and we're going to get this wrong and we're going to choose eyes. So notice on the bottom left it says wrong, and my score has not increased. Snakes don't have, and I know that snakes don't have eyelids, so let's choose the right one and see if our score goes up to 2. Yes, and it says correct. So there I've done a little bit of testing, and that's awesome. Okay, at this point, just to make this simple, I kept everything disabled, the buttons disabled. You can't do anything on the screen, and all it says is you have completed the quiz question, and that is all that I had people do, or teachers, educators do in the workshop. That was the extent of it. If you have more time, and obviously students, if they get excited, they'll learn different things to do here. So at this point, it would be kind of cool if in the label you wrote, you have completed the quiz questions. Well done, you have a score of 2. Or you should probably do this again because your score is 0. Those kinds of things could be in your code within a condition statement, checking for what the score is, for example. You might also, once you get 3 out of 3, you might want to go on to the next screen. That type of thing could be coded in. So that's all we've done. So the only way to get out of this is to go back to home. Now, notice we go to home. If we go back to quiz, okay, it changes the snakes don't have, the label, but what it does not change is the score, and everything is still disabled. So, that's something we could debug, but it's really great testing because it tells us a lot. What it tells us is that, hold on a minute, that's probably not what we want. So some things would need to be changed when we do that. Okay, would we want to do the quiz again, etc. So just so you know the difference really quickly again, I know I will be explaining this in the workshop, but there's 3 types of variables in Thunkable. So the one that we're using here is actually the app type variable. So it is only when this app is alive or open. So if I go and close this app, start it again, you'll notice that as soon as I go to quiz, it has reset itself. There is no score. I will prove that. I'm going to choose meat because that's the right answer for that. What do snakes eat? And my score is 1, and it gets to the second. So it's just gone and generated itself. It's set all those 2 variables that are in that code. So it's reset the score to 0 or initialized it. It's also initialized the row when you first start to 1, which is perfect. Okay, now, if you had changed that, and it's always good to do this as a test, if you had changed those 2 variables to stored variables, what would happen is that would not change. Doesn't matter how many times you open that app, it would constantly be at this point. Sorry, let me just get to the point where you're at the end. Okay, it would look like that. Okay, so we go to home, you open it up again. Let's say you actually closed it down, shut it down, open it up, it would always look like this, depending on, obviously it would change depending on the score that you had, but it would look the same every time you open it. Now, the thing about that is that if you were to put a stored variable, that would work for certain things. So that might work for if you're at certain level. So if you have levels in a game or an app that you've created, and I've worked through this app and I'm up to level 4, I don't want to lose that level. So that would be something you put in a stored variable, for example. Then we've also got the cloud variables, which are basically, on a server somewhere in a database held for us. And that is excellent for other things, but basically the best example I always give to students, because they groan but they love it, and I talk about Pokemon Go, and they'll laugh and they'll say, "Oh, are you still playing that?" Well, I don't know, off and on. Sometimes I get sick of Pokemon Go. I actually delete my I actually uninstall the app completely from my phone. And then what happens is I 3 months later find out that they have a really great event that I'm missing out on, and I install it again, and guess what? All of my data is still there. I'm still at level 36. I'm still got all of the, whatever it is. I have all the Pokemons that I've already caught, and I'm at the same level, etc. So that is because Pokemon Go or Niantic, they save all of that on a server and a big database somewhere far, far away. And that's what you tell them, and that's good enough for students, okay? So that's a really good example of 3 different types of variables. Anyway, I hope that's helped, and especially if you didn't go to the workshop and you just need a general idea of how this app works.